Hi, it's Dion here. I made a video yesterday about methadone being a viable option as far as getting off of heroin or any other type of opiate that's being problematic in your life, particularly fentanyl. Um, I think a lot of people are misled about what methadone is and what it's all about. And a lot of that comes from especially YouTube videos. I've seen many YouTube videos where they they describe methadone as being like the liquid handcuffs is what they call it. Okay, well, I want to put that into perspective a little bit and really give you an accurate description of what it would be like to be on methadone in reality. If you're really serious about getting clean and you're not playing around and you really are looking for a way to find recovery and you've had no luck so far doing it on your own, doing it with the help of 12 steps, AA, NA, and you're looking for some kind of medical intervention to assist you to get that long-term recovery that you've been looking for. Methadone definitely could be the answer to the problem. If you're looking for long-term recovery and you're serious about making changes in your life, and it's more than just getting on methadone. You don't just get on methadone and think, okay, problem solved. Okay, that's the end of the road. No, you have to. You should either get a therapist. Sorry, I'm itching. You should either get a therapist, or if you have a really good counselor at the clinic that you would sign up with. I happen to have an extremely good counselor at the clinic I go to. I've got an awesome relationship with her, and I talk to her about everything and anything, and she has been very helpful in always leading me in the right direction. If I have a query about something, she can lead me in the right direction and, always give me really positive advice on what to do in a particular situation that I'm dealing with. So if you happen to get a really good counselor that is willing to work with you and actually really cares about you as a person. See, my counselor genuinely cares about me. And I know this because when I was sharing with her something traumatic that I went through, she actually broke down and cried right in front of me. And it was at that moment that I realized just how much she cared about me. Because you just don't see counselors at methadone clinics break down and get emotional in front of you over something you've told them that happened to you. It just doesn't happen. I've been going to methadone clinics for the past almost 13 years. I have never had a counselor ever get emotionally involved in anything I've ever told them or in any way, shape, or form. She's even called me on holidays to wish me well on different holidays. She has been such a godsend as far as somebody I can talk to in a time of need. And I really appreciate her guidance and her availability to always be there when I need, some sound advice or I just need someone to talk to in a situation where I need someone on the other line to talk me through a situation I'm going through. She's been incredibly helpful, and I really think she's one in a million because it's very rare that you get a counselor that is truly as invested in their patients or their clients as she is with me personally. I don't know what her relationships are with her other clients, but I know when it comes to me, she's been immensely helpful and immensely positive, upbeat, and she believes in me. she honestly believes in me and believes I'm gonna make it in life. I'm doing well, and she reminds me how great I'm doing, the strides I've made to 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 do the right thing, and she makes me believe in myself. I'm thinking if she believes in me that much, then I need to believe in myself at least half as much as she believes in me, and maybe I can get somewhere. I think I've said in past video or two that starting tomorrow I'm taking a class. It's an online course to become a recovery peer support specialist, and that job entails basically helping other newcoming addicts, or even somebody that is wanting to or has a desire to get clean and sober, and they just need somebody to give them some guidance and some sound advice on what options are out there for them to look into as far as getting off the drug. They may even ask me, what did you do? How did you do it? What worked for you? And I definitely would have no problem telling them that the method that worked for me was medication assisted treatment, which was methadone in particular. You know, the reason I'm such a big advocate for methadone, and I'm not trying to push methadone on people that don't need it or really don't want it. It's a very personal choice when someone decides what route to take when it comes to getting into recovery. It's a very personal choice, and it's a choice that one has to make by themselves. But it doesn't hurt to have people around them that are giving them good information on what's out there as far as help. I'm not trying to sway anyone to do anything that they're not willing to do or don't want to do. I'm just giving you the information that I have gained over the years being a patient on methadone, how it's worked for me and how it's been a miracle in my life. Okay, I'm not saying it's going to work the same way for you because everyone is different. And the medication, it's a very individualized thing. I've seen a good portion of people that come to my clinic doing well. And I see it being a very positive tool that they use to get into long-term sobriety, long-term recovery. And I'm only telling you guys what worked for me. And the reason I'm such a big advocate about it is because this medication changed my life. Okay, I went from being somebody who felt like I was a hopeless cause. I felt like there was no hope for me. I was doomed to be a dope fiend till I took my last breath. And that's a tough pill to swallow, to know that, your life is, that chaotic and that much of a wreck that you don't see a way out. And at that time in my life, when things were just so on the downhill spiral, I really felt like there was no hope, that I was a total lost cause, and I should just slit my wrist now because it's over with. I didn't have the guts to do it though. I attempted suicide on many times in my life. First time I attempted to commit suicide, I was 8 years old. I think I said before that I came from a very dysfunctional family. My childhood was full of a lot of chaos, a lot of problems, and I spent the better part of my early childhood, being surrounded by drug addicts and, being, pushed here and there and everywhere from this household to that household. My mother always wanted me to be with her, and she would be dragging me around with her to dope houses, and I would be in in these people's houses where they had kids that they had cockroaches in their bed. They had no clean clothes, barely any food. They were living in a basement apartment in Chicago in the middle of winter where there was barely any heat. The house was cold, and my mother would say to me, "You see how lucky you are? You see how good you have it compared to these kids?" And what my mother failed to recognize is that, yeah, I'm not denying I had material things, but did I have a stable, sound lifestyle? Did I have a mother that was sober and was present in my life and was a positive, productive person that could be a positive influence in my life? No. You know, she nodded out the wheel when we were driving one time. We drove into a car. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. My face went straight into the dashboard. If she'd been going even a few miles faster, I might have went through the whole windshield. It was just a lucky moment that I didn't die in that car wreck. You know, my mother put me through so much turmoil, so much ups and downs that it's not even funny. You know, I remember she would have me sit in the car in an alleyway when she would go in this garage. And she had me sitting in there. It was the middle of winter. It was cold. I was sitting in this car freezing my ass off. And I finally went to where I saw her with the door she went into. I went in there, and I go in there, and what do I see? She's got her arms stretched out. Some guy shooting her up with drugs. And as soon as she sees me, she goes, "What the fuck did you get out of the car for? What, are you stupid? Go get back in the car. I'll be there in a minute." We go home, and as soon as we get home, she brings out this big Barbie dream house and said, "Here, I'm giving you your Christmas present early. You can play with it." And when my mother got sober, she told me that she gave me that early Christmas present, not so much to buy me off or, to undermine what she knew that I already saw. She just wanted to take my mind off of what I saw and make it so that I wasn't focused on that ugly thing that I just had to witness. And she said, "I just wanted you to not have to be thinking about what you just saw." She said, "I wanted you to be thinking about something more pleasant." She said, "You were just a kid." And she said, "I know I yelled at you." She said, "It was more anger towards myself of what I was doing to you." She said, "A lot of times I would get mad at you, and I was lashing out at you, but it was really myself I was angry with." She said, "I know that I handled things in the wrong way on many occasions." She said, "I blamed you for things, like when I was doing poorly in school, and she called me stupid. I failed the third grade because she transferred me to 3 different schools in 1 year. I just couldn't keep up between trying to make new friends every time I went to a new school and trying to keep up with the curriculum when every school I went to was in a different part of their curriculum. I just couldn't keep up anymore. I gave up." Those standardized tests that they give, I think they're called Iowa standardized tests. I forget what they're called. It's been so long, but they usually take a week. They take a week of school, and they do these standardized tests to see where that school's students fall as far as the curriculum, how their learning ability is, where they fall as far as what they've learned and how they're doing in school. Well, I missed school that week. So when I went back to school, I was supposed to take a week to do that test. Because I had given up on school, I was convinced I was stupid, even though there was a part of me that knew my mother was to blame for a lot of it. I still felt stupid, and I took the whole test in maybe less than an hour. It should have taken a week to take this test. I just filled in any old bubble and called it a day. And my grandmother and my mother came up to the school a short time after that and had a meeting with the teachers, and they said that she should have been taking these tests over the course of the whole week, but she finished it in less than an hour. And she said, obviously she's not going to do very good on the test And that was when they decided I needed to repeat the third grade. That was a massive blow. When my mother found out that I was failing the third grade, she come home and she goes, "Are you the biggest idiot walking?" She said, "You can't even pass the third grade. Are you stupid?" And I was convinced I was stupid because my mother had told me I was so stupid all the time. And when I was in the fourth grade, near the end of the school year, I moved in with my grandparents because my mother's addiction had gotten so far out of hand. She was leaving me alone in the house with people. I woke up one time with a bunch of people laying on the floor of the living room and dining room, a bunch of guys, and I was alone in the house. My mother was gone, and I ran to the nearest payphone and called my grandparents, and they picked me up. And it was then that they said I couldn't go back there. I could not live there anymore. They told my mother, they said, "Be reasonable." They said, "Your daughter is suffering at your hands." She said, is it fair for her to live this way?" They said, "If you want to live this way, by all means, live the way you want to live. But don't make your daughter have to pay the price for your actions." And they said, "Right now, she is paying a severe price for what you're doing with your life." And she agreed. And I went back to my mother's house, packed up my stuff, and went to my grandparents. And I remember when we drove away that day, looking at her out the back window of the car, and I was waving to her. And I remember feeling so bad. I'm trying not to get emotional about this because it brings back memories, but I felt so bad. Even though I did not want to live there, and I did not want to be in that situation anymore, I still love my mother, and I felt so bad. I felt like I was abandoning her. Because I remember when she would be sleeping, I would put mirrors up against her face to make sure she was breathing. I was so worried about her all the time. I knew what she was doing was causing a lot of harm. And I don't know how I was so in tune and so overtly aware of what was going on with my mother. But I was very aware of her drug addiction. I could just take one look at her and know she was high. I knew right off the bat between when she was high and when she was sober. And that summer we went to my grandparents. They had a cabin in Canada. Every summer we would go there for the summer. And so we went to Canada for the summer. And when we returned home, we found out my mother was in prison. She had sold cocaine to an undercover detective, and she fought the case for a couple years, but she finally got sentenced to 6 years in prison. She did like 3.5 years. I remained living with my grandparents during this time, and it was a blessing in disguise in a lot of ways. It saved her life. She turned her life around. She went into a drug treatment center that they offered it within the prison system. So she was in a drug treatment program within the prison system, and she stayed in that drug treatment program the entire duration that she was incarcerated. And I remember the first time we went and saw her, she gained a bunch of weight because when I last saw her, I think she weighed 88, 89 pounds. She looked awful. She looked so bad. And when we saw her for the first time, she put on a bunch of weight. And I remember I was so ecstatic to see her. I was so happy to see her and see her doing well. And even though she was doing well and I saw she was doing well, I was still not to the point where I ever wanted to live with her again. I was dead set that I would never live with my mother again, regardless what changes she made. I just did not want to go through that again. She remained in prison for a couple years, and then she went from being in prison to a work release program, and she began working for attorneys, doing a lot of the work that entailed her going back and forth to court, court, courtrooms and going to clerk's offices and pulling paperwork, and she was like a runner. And she worked for the wife. She was an attorney, but she was the wife of the man who was in charge of the drug program she was in prison. He believed in my mother so much that he gave her a good reference for working for his wife, who was an attorney. She got an apartment downtown Chicago. My grandparents helped out a bit with the rent because it was kind of expensive, but they wanted her to be away from the inner city where the drugs were and stuff. They wanted her to have a fresh start, and she was doing really well. And I saw she was doing well. So I did something that I swore I would never do. When I was in the 8th grade, I decided to give it a shot and move in with my mother again. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made. I moved in with her, and things went good between us. She paid for me. I was taking piano lessons for several years now, but she wanted me to continue my piano lessons, so I was taking piano lessons at the Civic Opera House in downtown Chicago, which was pretty cool. I never became a great pianist or anything. I was just a mediocre player. I didn't put as much effort into it as I probably should have. I could have been a lot better if I put more effort into it. I really wanted to play. I just didn't feel like I was naturally gifted in the piano. That's why I didn't put as much effort, because I didn't feel like it was coming as naturally to me as to other people it did. But anyway, things were going really well between my mother and I, and she then decided she wanted to be a substance and alcohol abuse counselor in the prisons and in the jails in Chicago. And she went back to school and got her certification in substance and alcohol abuse counseling. And she was working in a prison in Illinois. First, she was working in Cook County Jail, and then she transferred and was working in the prison in Illinois. And she was doing really well. And she ended up buying a house. My grandparents helped with the down payment, but she bought a house in Naperville, Illinois. And I had to transfer schools from the high school I was going to. I was going to an all-girls Catholic high school, and I had to transfer to a public high school in Joliet, Illinois. Or Aurora, Illinois, sorry. But I didn't like the high school. It was too big, too crowded, and I was used to my little high school. There were 17 people in my graduating class. So I decided, after I went one semester at that school my junior year, that I decided after my senior year I would go back to the school I went to and move in with my grandparents for my final year. And that's what I did. I really don't know why I'm telling all this backstory. I'm just making a point that my mother had transformed her life, and she had like 14 years clean, and when we were all living in Las Vegas, and I was using crack cocaine at the time, it became too much for my mother to deal with, dealing with me, my aunt, my uncle, who were all actively using drugs, and I would take her vehicle and be gone for like a month. I would let the dope dealer use her vehicle in lieu of drugs, and he would be gone with it and never come back, and it would end up getting impounded, and she'd have to pay to get it out of impound. It was a nightmare. I think about the things I did when I was in my addiction that were so ridiculous and so catastrophic. I did so many things to hurt people that I loved. My mother would be up all night worrying about me, just worrying sick. I was like, okay. And then when I get home and the worry was gone, the anger came out, and she was angry that I had taken her vehicle, was gone. She goes, "You have a son here." She's like, "You should be here with your son." And she was right. She was right. And the longer I would be gone, I would miss my son. And I would desperately want to be there with him. And I would want to go home, but then I was afraid to go home because I had been gone so long that I was afraid of the repercussions with my mother for returning after being gone so long and everything I had done. But my point is that being around all of us addicts who are currently using, my mother relapsed and she began smoking crack, which was something she had never done before. When she was using drugs back in the late 80s, she was shooting heroin and cocaine. She was shooting speedballs. Crack was a new thing with her, and she continued doing that for multiple years. Then she switched to meth. Then she started shooting heroin, and she died from an Oxycontin overdose in 2011. I think it was June of 2011. My 9-year-old son was alone with her that night, and he woke up at around 4 or 4:30 in the morning, and he couldn't find her, but then he found her on the floor. She was half under the bed, half out of, half of her body was under the bed, and that's why he didn't see her at first. And he was tapping her, and she wasn't waking up, and he was like, "Nana, this isn't funny," because my mother used to do something with him that I used to hate that she did. She would play dead with him just to get a reaction, to see how he would react if she was dead. And I thought, that's not funny, because God forbid that ever happened, how that would affect him. Well, this time it was for real. She had passed away sometime during the night. She was on the floor, and my son was such a brave little boy. He called 911, and he immediately, he was very calm and rational on the phone. They said that he handled himself like a real pro. He gave the address and explained what was going on. And when they came there, they couldn't believe how calm he was. And he told me, my son said, "Mom, I had to be a big boy because I wanted to save Donna. And I knew that if I got all crazy and was crying and hysterical, it wouldn't help Nana any. And I wanted to save her." He said, "But no matter what I did, it didn't save her." And that just breaks my heart that my son had to go through that at 9 years old. He doesn't talk about it much at this point. He's 23 now. He'll be 24 in September. But I think about my son. I think about the things he had to deal with as a little boy. And he had some similarities as far as a childhood like I did. And that's what I did not want for my son. I did not want my kids to ever go through anything similar to what I endured as a kid. My childhood was completely destroyed by my mother's addiction, and even my uncle, his addiction, played part in causing chaos in my life. I was scared shitless of my uncle because he was a violent person. He would throw bricks through the windows. He chased my grandfather around the backyard with a gun. I mean, he was scary. He was a scary individual. I was scared shitless of him. But my point in telling you about my mother's relapse, how she gained sobriety and how she relapsed, is just letting you know that, they say that only 1% of heroin addicts can get off heroin by themselves and stay off for the long haul. The long haul meaning for the better part of the rest of their lives, pretty much. Once she relapsed, had that major relapse in, I think it was 2002, something like that, 2003, maybe 2003. She definitely, she couldn't come back from that. And in her mind, she figured, what was the point? I don't think I mentioned this, but my mother contracted HIV in the late 80s from this girl, Julie, that she was shooting up drugs with. Everyone that she was using drugs with in the late 80s died many, many years ago. My mother lived a very long time with the disease. She contracted it like 88, 89, but she did not die until 2011. And she was diagnosed with full-blown AIDS in 2001, right around the time I found out I was pregnant with my first son. In her mind, she figured, what was the point of even trying anymore, because she was going to die anyway. And she said, if I'm going to die, I'm going to go out with a bang. And I just wish she could have left this world in a more dignified, respectable manner, because dying of a drug overdose is not the way anyone should have to leave this earth. It's a disgraceful manner. You know, she died in her addiction. She died in the disease of addiction, and I feel awful about it. But anyway, I just wanted to let people know that I'm not trying to talk anybody into getting on methadone if that's not something that they feel is right for them. You know what's right for you. You know what's going to be a good fit for you as far as the path you choose to go down when it comes to getting clean and getting recovery. The only reason I reiterate information on methadone and I continue to tell people how much of a miracle it was in my life is because I don't want people to look at methadone like it's this demon of a drug or a medication, should I say. It's not. It's a drug, but it's a prescribed drug. I don't want people to look at it like it's this bad demonic thing that people are, ruining their lives by getting on this medication. It can be a life-saving medication for people that cannot get clean and sober any other way. I explained several times that I could not find any other way to do it. The mental obsession was such a hindrance in the process of me trying to get recovery that it just wasn't going to happen for me. Not by abstinence only. I needed medical intervention. And I think there are a lot of people out there who are struggling with opioid addictions, specifically heroin and or fentanyl. But those medications are extremely strong opiates, and they need to be dealt with in a way that is equally as powerful as the addiction was. And the only thing I can think of that's as equal in power as one's addiction is something like methadone. Not even Suboxone is strong enough to help with a fentanyl addiction. It's not as effective as people would like to think it is. Suboxone doesn't have the tenacity, I guess you could say, to come up against a drug like fentanyl. Fentanyl is extremely potent, and it's not a drug that can be easily fixed with Suboxone. Suboxone just isn't a good fit for it. And I'm saying this because this is what I've learned by watching documentaries online about fentanyl addiction and why it's so difficult for people on fentanyl to get into long-term recovery, because it's a super strong opiate or opioid, not opiate, but it's a super strong opioid, and it takes a lot to overcome this powerful opioid. But methadone is powerful enough to meet the the power of fentanyl. It has the ability to help you get into long-term recovery because it's strong enough to get rid of the withdrawal symptoms and get rid of the craving. Because methadone, you can go on a high enough dose that it'll do the trick. But Suboxone, it levels off at a certain dose. It caps off at a certain dose, and you can't go any higher. And that's a problem for somebody coming off fentanyl because it's not going to be strong enough to curb the cravings and deal with the withdrawal symptoms. I'm just trying to give information and give you all the details I can about this medication and let you decide for yourself. I mean, do the research. Look up methadone, pros and cons. There's always going to be cons with everything. There's always going to be something that you don't like about anything in life. Nothing is ever going to be 100% perfect. But I can guarantee you that if you have had no success with any other method of getting clean, then you might want to think about methadone. Just think about it. Look into it. Do some research. And get some other death testimonials of people who've had success getting off opiates with the help of methadone. And how long you stay on it is completely up to you. Some people stay on it for a couple years, but don't get on it. And if you're going to rush to get off it, because you need to stay on it long enough for it to really be effective in your life and help you maintain sobriety for a lengthy period of time. It doesn't make sense to get on it if you're going to right away get off. And it really didn't help fix some of the issues that needed to be addressed. So anyway, I hope I gave you some more information on methadone maintenance, and I hope that anyone who is looking for help, I hope I've given them at least another outlet they can look into for something that will work to get you off of the opiates or heroin or fentanyl, because there are options medically that you should look into before just saying it's hopeless. It's never hopeless. There's hope for everyone. You just got to find the right route to recovery that meets your needs. But thanks for listening. Talk to you again later. Bye.